So I wanted to let folks know, obviously we're going to be talking about mental illness. There's some talk about suicide and other topics around transphobia, so if any of those things are not what you were expecting, feel free to take care of yourself as needed or to step outside if something's overwhelming. Just wanted to throw that out there. And also, you don't have to be polite if you'd like to clap during this. If I say something cool and you're like, yeah, that's how I feel free to express yourself. This is a safe space. Alrighty, so when I was a little kid, no older than 6 or 7, I used to ask myself this weird question. I think I made it up or something. If I had a megaphone and I translated my words into every language on the face of the planet, and every living person could hear what I had to say, what would I say? It's oddly specific, and at the time I probably said something silly like, don't be mean to people, because I was 6. But it's funny to me now because this is a question that has taken on many forms in my life. In a way, every article I've ever published has been an opportunity to shout into that megaphone and to reach people with the hopes that I can say something important. Being on the stage, too, is another chance to reach people, even if it's just one person, and to make it count. No pressure or anything. Well, I don't have a giant megaphone that everyone can hear, and I'm pretty sure that would violate a lot of noise ordinances, so it's probably good that I don't have it. I've had the privilege of being a blogger for the last couple of years, who's reached readers in over 180 countries worldwide with my website, Let's Queer Things Up. I didn't realize when I was 6 or 7 that, in a way, I would actually be holding that megaphone and that people everywhere would be listening and even translating my words into other languages. So who am I and why am I humble bragging on your stage? I'm Sam Dillon Finch, and much to my parents' dismay, I write about my life on the internet. For a couple years now, I've been talking about my experiences as transgender and as bipolar. I also have anxiety, but it's kind of hard to differentiate what's bipolar and what's anxiety, so it's a lot easier to just pretend I have one mental disorder, but I guess I have two. So I guess this is the part where I get into my emotional backstory. Let's do it. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and anxiety when I was 18 years old, but I knew that something wasn't quite right for most of my life. I remember everything feeling so intense, being on a constant roller coaster and wondering why I, at age 12, felt like the world was ending at least 100 times a week when I didn't have to pay taxes or have a job or anything. And I went from being a really emotional kid to being a really despondent and pretty troubled teenager. I remember really distinctly the insomnia that would keep me up for nights on end, staring at the ceiling while shadows moved around on the edges of my vision, threatening to close in on me. I remember the sadness that made me feel like my bones were crumbling inside of my body, like there was nothing to hold me up or to keep me together. Just getting out of bed in the morning took an unimaginable amount of energy. But then a bright spot, a sudden jolt of energy would bring my limbs back to life, and then this delectable, intoxicating idea would pop into my brain. Maybe, just maybe, I was special. The most special, even of anybody. I was irresistible, brilliant, powerful. The depression would quickly and rapidly dissolve, and it was replaced by this dazzling rush of self-importance, a kind of magic that left me buzzing. And then I started talking too fast. The ideas would whiz through my mind faster than I could catch them. And I felt this kind of ecstasy that it was so good that it hurt, and then all it did was hurt, until it turned on me, it betrayed me, and it just slid back into depression again. The puzzling thing is that for years, the idea that I might have bipolar disorder was not even on my radar. Because mania had convinced me somehow, many, many times, that I was actually so magical and so powerful that I had cured myself of my depression. I had thought my way out of it. I kept thinking that I was in control. I didn't think it was a manic episode. I thought it was a fucking miracle. An amazing feat. I saved myself. But I was only seeing one side of the coin. That is until it deceived me one too many times. Until I realized that mania was just the bright headlights before the train pummels into you. Until I crashed so many times that it was impossible to trust my own happiness, because I started associating happiness with inevitable disappointment and despair. I finally saw the connection between the two, and I started to dread happiness. I call this the chronic, the other shoe will fall syndrome, and that's something I still grapple with to this day. Every time it felt like depression was hitting me harder and harder and harder, and each time I felt less and less inclined to fight back, knowing that even if I got through it this time, that was the battle and it wasn't the war. I could only fight for so long, and after many battles with no end in sight, I started to get desperate and I started to get dangerous. I remember being a teenager who had nothing to lose. I remember not buckling my seatbelt in cars because it didn't matter. I remember all the times I stood on balconies and on rooftops and imagined just falling. I remember wishing that the universe would just do the dirty work for me. Maybe a car accident or a tornado or something, just so I didn't have to. For much of my adolescent years, I moved through the world as a teenager with a death wish. But looking at me, you wouldn't have known, because I didn't tell anyone, and I was so good at pretending. But a mindset like that is not sustainable. You can't live with that kind of desperation indefinitely. Something has to give. And after years and years of struggling, something finally gave. Let me tell you a story.